Sarah Martinez stared at the wedding invitation in her hands, her brother's name written in elegant gold letters across the cream-colored paper. The date was circled in red on her calendar, just 3 weeks away. She had been looking forward to this day for months, planning to wear the blue dress she had bought specially for the occasion, and preparing a heartfelt speech as the maid of honor. Her phone buzzed with a message from her supervisor at the intelligence agency where she worked as a counterterrorism analyst. The message was brief but urgent. Meeting tomorrow, 800, priority assignment, classified. Sarah's heart sank as she read the words. She knew what this meant. After 5 years working in the shadows, protecting her country from threats most people never knew existed, she recognized the signs of a critical mission. The next morning, Sarah sat in a sterile conference room surrounded by her colleagues and superiors. The briefing was unlike anything she had experienced before. A terrorist organization had been planning a major attack on American soil, and their intelligence suggested it would happen within the next month. The group had been operating under the radar for years, but recent communications intercepts had revealed their location and timeline. Commander Richards, a stern woman in her 50s, addressed the team with gravity in her voice. The mission required deep cover infiltration of the terrorist cell, posing as sympathizers to gather critical intelligence about their plans. The operation would take exactly 3 weeks to complete, with no possibility of contact with family or friends during that time. Sarah felt her stomach drop as she realized the timing. Agent Martinez, Commander Richards called her name. Your psychological profile and language skills make you perfect for this assignment. You speak fluent Arabic and have experience in undercover operations. We need someone who can blend in seamlessly and gain their trust quickly. Sarah nodded, knowing she had no choice. Her country needed her, even if it meant missing the most important day in her brother's life. That evening, Sarah called her brother Michael from her apartment, struggling to find the right words. "Mike, I'm so sorry, but something urgent has come up at work. I won't be able to make it to your wedding." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When Michael finally spoke, his voice was filled with hurt and confusion. "Sarah, this is my wedding, your only brother's wedding. What could possibly be more important than this?" She wanted to tell him the truth, to explain that she was about to risk her life to protect thousands of innocent people, including him and his future wife. But the nature of her work required absolute secrecy. Instead, she gave him a vague explanation about a critical work assignment that couldn't be postponed. Michael's disappointment was clear in every word he spoke before hanging up the phone. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation and training. Sarah studied the terrorist organization's structure, memorized their key members' faces, and practiced her cover story until it became second nature. She would pose as Elena Vasquez, disillusioned former military contractor seeking revenge against the American government. Her backstory was carefully crafted to be believable and appealing to the terrorist recruiters. On the day she was supposed to be helping her brother prepare for his wedding, Sarah was instead sitting in a safe house, putting on worn clothes and removing all traces of her real identity. She looked at herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Her hair was dyed black, her makeup was heavy and dark, and her eyes held a hardness that wasn't naturally there. As she prepared to leave for the mission, Sarah thought about her brother getting ready for the happiest day of his life. She imagined him adjusting his tie, nervous and excited, probably wondering why his sister had abandoned him at such an important moment. She whispered a prayer for his happiness and for her own safety, knowing that the next 3 weeks would test everything she had learned about courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. The mission began with a meeting in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Sarah arrived as Elena, carrying herself with the anger and bitterness her cover story required. She met with Ahmad, a recruiter for the terrorist cell, who scrutinized her every word and gesture. The conversation was tense, filled with coded language and careful probing from both sides. Ahmad seemed satisfied with her story and her apparent commitment to their cause. He explained that they were looking for people with specific skills to help with an upcoming operation that would send a message to the American government. Sarah nodded enthusiastically, playing her part perfectly while mentally recording every detail for her later reports. The warehouse meeting lasted 3 hours, during which Sarah learned that the terrorist cell was larger and more organized than intelligence had initially believed. They had members embedded in various parts of the city, and their plan involved multiple targets. The scope of the potential attack was more extensive than anyone had imagined, making her mission even more critical. As Sarah left the warehouse, she knew there was no turning back. Her brother's wedding was happening in just a few days, and she would be deep undercover, unable to contact anyone from her real life. She drove through the city streets, passing familiar places that reminded her of her normal life, wondering if she would ever see them the same way again after completing this dangerous assignment. 3 days after the warehouse meeting, while her brother Michael was exchanging vows with his beloved Jessica, Sarah was sitting in a cramped apartment above a Middle Eastern restaurant, surrounded by people who wanted to destroy everything she had sworn to protect. The irony wasn't lost on her that on what should have been one of the happiest days of her family's life, she was pretending to hate the country she loved. The terrorist cell had accepted Elena's story completely. Ahmad had introduced her to the EUI core group, including their leader, a man known only as Khalil. He was younger than Sarah had expected, perhaps 30 years old, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see through people's souls. Khalil spoke in quiet, measured tones about their mission to strike fear into the hearts of Americans and make them understand the pain their government had caused around the world. Sarah found herself in the uncomfortable position of nodding, along with their rhetoric, while her heart broke for the innocent lives they planned to destroy. She had been trained for this psychological challenge, but nothing could have prepared her for the real experience of sitting across from people who spoke casually about mass murder, as if discussing the weather. The apartment served as their planning headquarters, with maps spread across a wooden table and photographs of potential targets pinned to the walls. Sarah memorized every detail while appearing to be just another eager recruit. The targets included a busy shopping center, a subway station during rush hour, and most shocking of all, a children's hospital. The thought of innocent kids being hurt made her stomach turn, but she maintained her composure. Khalil assigned specific roles to each team member. Sarah's military background made her valuable for reconnaissance and security planning. She was tasked with surveying the shopping center and identifying security weaknesses, escape routes, and the best times for maximum casualties. The assignment felt like a betrayal of everything she believed in, but she knew the intelligence she gathered would ultimately save lives. Over the next week, Sarah spent her days walking through the shopping center with Ahmad, pretending to scout for their attack, while actually identifying ways to protect the innocent people around them. Families pushed strollers past them, teenagers laughed with friends, elderly couples held hands while window shopping. Each face reminded her why her sacrifice was necessary. During evening meetings at the apartment, Sarah learned more disturbing details about the plot. The organization had been planning this attack for over 2 years, carefully recruiting members and gathering resources. They had inside information about security protocols at their targets, suggesting they had accomplices in legitimate positions. The scope of their network was far beyond what intelligence agencies had suspected. Sarah's handler, Agent Thompson, had arranged for brief coded communications through a local newsstand owner who was actually an undercover federal agent. Every few days, Sarah would buy a newspaper and receive updated instructions hidden in the pages. The messages were always brief. Continue mission. Critical intelligence needed on timeline and weapons. The weapons were Sarah's biggest concern. During her second week undercover, Khalil took her to a storage facility on the industrial side of town. Inside a rented unit, she saw enough explosive materials to level several city blocks. The terrorists had been acquiring components slowly over many months, never buying enough at once to trigger suspicion. The sophistication of their operation was frightening. Khalil explained that they planned to use multiple coordinated attacks to maximize psychological impact. The shopping center bombing would happen first, followed by the subway attack 30 minutes later when emergency responders were focused on the first scene. The hospital attack would occur last, targeting the families of victims from the earlier bombings. The cruelty of the plan made Sarah's blood run cold. As she gained more trust within the group, Sarah discovered that the timeline had been moved up. Originally planned for the following month, Khalil announced that they would execute their plan in just 10 days. The reason for the acceleration was disturbing. They had received intelligence suggesting that law enforcement was getting close to discovering their operation. Someone within the terrorist network suspected they had been compromised. Ahmad pulled Sarah aside after one evening meeting, his eyes filled with suspicion. He asked her detailed questions about her background, her contacts, and her commitment to their cause. Sarah maintained her cover perfectly, but she could sense the growing paranoia within the group. Trust was eroding, and she knew her time was running out. The psychological toll of the mission was becoming overwhelming. Sarah found herself having nightmares about the potential victims, seeing their faces in her dreams. She thought constantly about her brother's wedding, wondering if he had noticed her empty seat during the ceremony, if he had been hurt by her absence on his special day. The isolation from her real life was crushing. Despite the emotional challenges, Sarah continued gathering crucial intelligence. She learned the exact timing of each attack, the location of additional weapons caches, and the identities of several cell members who hadn't yet been discovered by law enforcement. Every piece of information brought her closer to preventing a tragedy of unprecedented scale. During her third week undercover, Sarah noticed increased activity around the apartment. New faces appeared at meetings, all looking nervous and determined. Khalil announced that they were entering the final phase of preparation. Final reconnaissance missions were assigned, weapons were distributed, and everyone was given detailed instructions for their specific roles in the coordinated attacks. Sarah's role was becoming more central to the operation. Khalil had chosen her to coordinate communications between the three attack teams during the actual event. This position gave her access to the complete operational plan and the ability to potentially disrupt the entire attack when the time came. She was exactly where she needed to be to save countless innocent lives, but the pressure was becoming almost unbearable. The morning of what was supposed to be the final day of Sarah's mission started with an urgent message from Agent Thompson. Hidden in her daily newspaper was a coded warning that made her blood freeze. Cover may be blown. Extract immediately. If possible, abort if necessary. Sarah crumpled the newspaper in her hands, knowing that extraction was impossible. She was too deep into the operation, and the attacks were scheduled for the following day. At the apartment headquarters, tensions were running high. Khalil had become increasingly paranoid, questioning every decision and double-checking every detail. He announced to the group that he suspected government infiltration and that everyone would be subjected to loyalty tests. Sarah's heart raced as she realized her worst fear was coming true. The careful balance she had maintained for 3 weeks was about to collapse. Ahmad approached Sarah with suspicion written across his face. He had been researching her background more thoroughly and found inconsistencies in her story. Elena Vasquez's military records showed some discrepancies that didn't match her spoken accounts of her service. Sarah quickly adapted her story, claiming that her bitterness toward the military had made her block out painful memories, but she could see Ahmad wasn't entirely convinced. The loyalty test Khalil devised was brutal in its simplicity. Each team member would be required to record a video message explaining their commitment to the cause and their willingness to die for their beliefs. These videos would be sent to other terrorist cells as proof of their dedication. Sarah realized this was also Khalil's way of ensuring everyone was fully committed, with no possibility of backing out. When Sarah's turn came to record her message, she drew upon every acting skill she had ever learned. Speaking as Elena, she poured fake passion into words that made her soul ache. She spoke about her hatred for America, her desire for revenge, and her willingness to sacrifice everything for their cause. The camera recorded every word, creating evidence that could destroy her real identity if it ever surfaced. After the video sessions, Khalil gathered everyone for final preparations. The shopping center team would plant their explosives during the early morning hours when security was lightest. The subway team would position themselves during the morning rush hour, blending in with commuters until the signal came. The hospital team would wait until the chaos from the first 2 attacks drew emergency responders away from their target. Sarah was assigned to the communication hub they had established in an abandoned office building overlooking the city center. From there, she would coordinate the timing of all three attacks and relay information between teams. This position was perfect for her real mission, giving her the ability to warn authorities and potentially save thousands of lives at the critical moment. The final night before the attacks, Sarah lay awake in her assigned safe house apartment, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. She thought about her brother Michael, probably settling into married life with Jessica, still hurt and confused by her absence from their wedding. She wondered if she would live through the next day to explain her sacrifice to him. As dawn approached, Sarah prepared for what could be her last day. She dressed carefully, ensuring her hidden communication device was properly concealed. Agent Thompson had provided her with an emergency transmitter that could send a single burst message to law enforcement, but using it would immediately blow her cover and put her life in extreme danger. The terrorist teams began moving to their positions at 6 in the morning. Sarah watched from the communication hub as Ahmad led the shopping center team toward their target, carrying backpacks filled with explosives. The subway team, led by a quiet man named Hassan, disappeared into the underground tunnels. The hospital team waited in a van parked several blocks from their target, ready to move when chaos erupted elsewhere. Khalil remained at the communication hub with Sarah, monitoring police radio frequencies and watching news broadcasts for any sign that their operation had been discovered. His paranoia had reached new heights, and he kept a loaded pistol on the table beside him. Sarah knew that if he suspected her true identity, she would have only seconds to react. At 8:30 in the morning, Ahmad radioed from the shopping center. The explosives were in place, hidden in strategic locations throughout the building. Hundreds of people were already inside, starting their day with no idea of the danger surrounding them. Sarah's hands trembled as she acknowledged his message, knowing that she held the power to save or destroy so many innocent lives. The subway team reported ready status 20 minutes later. Hassan's voice crackled through the radio, reporting that the morning rush hour was at its peak. Thousands of commuters filled the platforms and trains, completely unaware that death was waiting among them. Sarah looked at Khalil, who was smiling with anticipation, and felt sick to her stomach. At 9:15, Khalil gave Sarah the signal to begin the countdown. In exactly 15 minutes, Ahmad would detonate the shopping center explosives. 30 minutes later, Hassan would trigger the subway bombs. The hospital attack would follow 1 hour after that, when emergency rooms would be overwhelmed with victims from the first two attacks. Sarah knew this was her moment of truth. She could continue, playing her role and allow thousands of innocent people to die, or she could act on her true mission and risk everything to save them. Her hand moved slowly toward the emergency transmitter hidden in her jacket pocket, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Khalil could hear it. The next few minutes would determine not only the fate of countless innocent victims, but also whether Sarah Martinez would survive to see her brother again and explain why she had missed the most important day of his life. Everything she had trained for, everything she believed in, came down to this single moment of choice between maintaining her cover and saving lives. With 10 minutes remaining on the countdown, Sarah made her choice. She quietly activated the emergency transmitter in her jacket, sending a coded burst message to law enforcement with the locations and timing of all three planned attacks. The OR message included the exact positions of the explosives, the identity of team members, and the location of additional weapons caches. Her finger trembled as she pressed the tiny button that would save thousands of lives, but likely cost her own. Khalil was focused intently on the police scanner, listening for any signs that their operation had been discovered. Sarah continued her role as communications coordinator, maintaining radio contact with the three attack teams while silently praying that law enforcement would respond quickly enough to prevent the tragedy. She watched the digital clock on the wall count down the minutes, each second feeling like an eternity. At 9:22, Ahmad's voice crackled through the radio from the shopping center. His tone had changed from confident anticipation to confusion and alarm. "There are police everywhere," he whispered urgently. "SWAT teams are evacuating the building. They know exactly where we place the devices." Sarah's heart leapt with relief, but she maintained her shocked expression as she looked at Khalil. Khalil's face turned pale as he grabbed the radio. How is this possible? Abort the mission immediately. Get out of there now. But it was too late. Ahmad's radio went silent as law enforcement closed in on his position. Sarah could hear the distant sound of sirens through the office windows, growing closer and more numerous by the minute. The subway team reported similar problems moments later. Hassan's panicked voice came through the radio. Federal agents are surrounding the station. They're evacuating all the trains. Someone betrayed us. The reality of the situation was becoming clear to Khalil, and his suspicious eyes turned toward Sarah with deadly intensity. There's a traitor among us, Khalil said quietly, his hand moving toward the pistol on the table. Sarah knew she had to act quickly to maintain her cover, even though the mission was already compromised. She grabbed the radio and began shouting orders to the remaining teams, playing the part of someone desperate to salvage a failed operation. The hospital team was the last to report in, and their message confirmed what Sarah had hoped for. Law enforcement had surrounded the medical facility and were in the process of safely evacuating patients and staff. The coordinated response suggested that authorities had received detailed intelligence about all aspects of the terrorist plot. Sarah's sacrifice was working exactly as planned. Khalil stood up from his chair, his gun now pointed directly at Sarah. Someone gave them our exact plans, our locations, everything. You're the newest member of our group, Elena. You're the only one who could have betrayed us. Sarah's training kicked in as she prepared for what might be her final performance as an undercover agent. Are you insane? Sarah shouted back at him, her voice filled with convincing anger. I've risked everything for this mission. Maybe one of your trusted lieutenants got scared and sold us out. Don't blame me for your poor security. She had to keep him talking and distracted until law enforcement could locate their position and mount a rescue operation. Outside the office building, Sarah could hear the sound of helicopters circling overhead and multiple vehicles arriving in the parking lot below. The emergency transmitter had included their communication hub location, and federal agents were closing in quickly. Sarah knew she had to survive just a few more minutes until help arrived. Khalil's paranoia reached a breaking point as he screamed accusations at Sarah. In his rage, he began revealing details about other terrorist cells and planned attacks that she hadn't been able to uncover during her 3 weeks undercover. Without realizing it, he was providing her with additional intelligence that could prevent future tragedies. The sound of boots thundering up the stairway reached their floor, and Khalil realized that their position was about to be overrun. He grabbed Sarah by the arm and pulled her toward a back window, planning to use her as a human shield during his escape attempt. Sarah knew this was her chance to end the charade and help law enforcement capture the terrorist leader alive. As Khalil forced her toward the window, Sarah executed a combat move she had learned during her agency training. She twisted out of his grip, knocked the weapon from his hand, and pinned him against the wall just as federal agents burst through the door. The 3-week nightmare was finally over, but Sarah's ordeal was far from finished. Agent Thompson was among the first responders to reach the communication hub. He looked at Sarah with a mixture of relief and admiration as she maintained her Elena Vasquez persona until the room was secure. Only when Khalil was safely in custody did she finally allow herself to break character and acknowledge her real identity to the arresting officers. The immediate aftermath was chaos as law enforcement processed the scene and began interrogating the captured terrorist leader. Sarah provided detailed debriefing information about everything she had learned during her undercover mission, helping agents understand the full scope of the terrorist network and identify additional threats that needed to be addressed. In the hours following the arrests, news reports began covering the story of the prevented terrorist attacks. The media described it as one of the most significant counter-terrorism victories in recent history, with law enforcement successfully preventing multiple coordinated bombings that could have killed thousands of innocent people. Sarah watched the coverage from a secure facility, knowing that her name would never be mentioned publicly. The shopping center, subway station, and hospital that had been targeted were all secured without a single casualty. The explosive devices were safely removed by bomb disposal teams, and the weapons caches were seized before they could be used in other attacks. Sarah's 3 weeks of sacrifice had resulted in the complete dismantling of a major terrorist operation. As the initial excitement died down, Sarah finally had time to think about her personal life and the relationships she had damaged for the sake of her mission. Her brother Michael had tried calling her repeatedly during the week she was undercover, but she had been unable to respond to any of his messages. The wedding she had missed was just the beginning of the personal cost of her heroic actions. 2 days after the successful mission, Sarah sat in her apartment staring at her phone, trying to find the courage to call her brother Michael. She had been debriefed extensively by her superiors and cleared for limited contact with family members, though she still couldn't reveal the specific details of her undercover operation. The weight of maintaining her secret while trying to repair her relationship with Michael felt almost as challenging as the dangerous mission she had just completed. When she finally dialed his number, Michael's voice was cold and distant. "Sarah, I tried calling you dozens of times. Jessica and I were worried something terrible had happened to you. Where were you during the most important day of my life?" His hurt was evident in every word, and Sarah's heart broke knowing she couldn't tell him the complete truth about her absence. Sarah chose her words carefully, explaining that she had been involved in a classified government operation that prevented a major terrorist attack. She couldn't provide details, but she emphasized how critical the mission had been for national security. Michael's response was silence followed by a bitter laugh. "So you're telling me that you're some kind of secret agent now? Sarah, just be honest with me about why you didn't come to my wedding." The conversation lasted over an hour, with Sarah desperately trying to convince her brother that her work was legitimate and important, while respecting the classified nature of her mission. Michael struggled to understand how any job could be more important than family, especially during such a significant moment. The call ended with both siblings feeling frustrated and disconnected from each other. Jessica, Michael's new wife, was equally confused and hurt by Sarah's explanation. She had looked forward to getting to know her new sister-in-law and had been excited about having Sarah as her maid of honor. The empty space where Sarah should have been standing during the ceremony had been a constant reminder that something was seriously wrong in their family dynamic. Commander Richards called Sarah into her office the following week to discuss her exemplary performance during the undercover mission. The intelligence Sarah had gathered had led to the arrest of 17 additional terrorist suspects across 3 states and the prevention of at least 2 other planned attacks. Her sacrifice and courage had literally saved thousands of lives, making her one of the most successful deep-cover operatives in the agency's history. Despite the professional accolades, Sarah found herself struggling with the personal aftermath of her heroic actions. The 3 weeks of living as Elena Vasquez had left psychological scars that were difficult to process. She had spent so much time pretending to hate her country and embrace violence that returning to her normal life felt strange and disorienting. TD. Agency provided Sarah with counseling services to help her readjust after her deep cover mission. The therapist, Dr. Williams, specialized in helping intelligence operatives deal with the unique challenges of undercover work. During their sessions, Sarah talked about the difficulty of maintaining relationships while keeping such significant secrets from the people she loved most. Sarah's attempts to reconnect with Michael continued to be challenging. He had created a distance between them that felt impossible to bridge without revealing classified information. Their weekly phone calls became increasingly tense, with Michael expressing frustration about Sarah's vague explanations and her inability to provide concrete details about her work. The media attention surrounding the prevented terrorist attacks continued for weeks, with news outlets praising law enforcement's successful operation without mentioning the crucial role played by undercover operatives. Sarah watched interviews with FBI officials and terrorism experts, knowing that she had been at the center of the story, but could never receive public recognition for her sacrifice. 3 months after the mission, Sarah received an unexpected call from Agent Thompson. Intelligence agencies had discovered that Khalil's terrorist network was much larger than originally believed, extending into several other countries. Sarah's debriefing materials had become crucial evidence in an international investigation that was helping authorities dismantle similar cells around the world. The ongoing investigation meant that Sarah's identity as Elena Vasquez needed to remain protected indefinitely. She couldn't risk any public exposure that might compromise other operations or endanger other undercover agents working on related cases. This added another layer of difficulty to her attempts to explain her actions to her family members. Michael and Jessica celebrated their first wedding anniversary with a small party at their new home. Sarah was invited but found herself feeling out of place among Michael's friends and Jessica's family members. Everyone knew about her mysterious absence from the wedding, and their conversations felt awkward and strained despite their attempts to be welcoming. During the anniversary celebration, Sarah overheard Jessica talking to her sister about the wedding day. It was perfect except for Michael's sister not being there. He tried to act like it didn't matter, but I could see how much it hurt him. She still hasn't given us a real explanation for why she missed it. The pain in Jessica's voice made Sarah realize how much her necessary sacrifice had affected innocent people. Sarah began considering a career change, wondering if continuing her work in intelligence was worth the personal cost. She had always been dedicated to serving her country, but the isolation and secrecy required by her job were taking a toll on her mental health and family relationships. The successful mission had proven her capabilities, but it had also shown her what she was giving up for her career. Dr. Williams helped Sarah understand that her feelings were normal for someone who had endured such an intense undercover experience. Many operatives struggled with similar issues after long-term missions, especially when they couldn't share their experiences with family members. The key was finding ways to maintain her relationships while accepting the limitations imposed by her work. As the months passed, Sarah slowly began to find a new equilibrium in her life. She couldn't change what had happened during Michael's wedding, but she could work on rebuilding their relationship within the constraints of her security clearance. She started looking for ways to show Michael and Jessica that they were important to her, even if she couldn't explain all of her actions. The terrorist threat that Sarah had helped neutralize continued to have ripple effects throughout the intelligence community. Her success had led to new protocols for deep cover operations and had provided valuable insights into how terrorist networks operated and recruited new members. Her sacrifice was contributing to national security efforts that would protect countless future victims. 8 months after missing her brother's wedding, Sarah received a phone call that would change everything. Agent Thompson's voice was urgent as he explained that armed soldiers had suddenly stormed into a wedding reception hall across the city. The initial report suggested it might be connected to the terrorist network she had helped dismantle, and law enforcement needed her expertise to understand what was happening. The wedding that was being attacked belonged to the daughter of Judge Patricia Morrison, a federal judge who had been presiding over the trials of several terrorist suspects arrested during Sarah's mission. Intelligence suggested that remaining members of Khalil's network had planned this assault as revenge for their captured comrades, and to send a message about the consequences of cooperating with American authorities. Sarah arrived at the command center just as news helicopters began broadcasting live footage of the crisis. Armed men in military-style clothing had taken over the wedding venue, holding approximately 200 guests hostage. The attackers were demanding the release of all captured terrorist suspects and safe passage out of the country, in exchange for the lives of the innocent people trapped inside. As Sarah watched the news coverage, her blood ran cold when she recognized the venue. It was the same elegant ballroom where her brother Michael had wanted to hold his reception before choosing a different location. The irony was devastating. She had missed her own brother's peaceful wedding to prevent terrorist attacks, and now she was watching terrorists attack someone else's wedding celebration. The FBI tactical team leader briefed Sarah on what they knew about the situation. There were at least 6 armed attackers inside the building, led by a man believed to be Khalil's younger brother, seeking revenge for the destruction of their cell. The hostages included the bride and groom, their families, elderly grandparents, and several young children. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Sarah's knowledge of the terrorist network's structure and tactics made her invaluable to the rescue operation. She provided detailed information about their likely escape plans, their psychological profiles, and their probable reactions to different negotiation strategies. Her insights helped the tactical team develop a comprehensive plan to safely resolve the crisis. As negotiations with the terrorists began, Sarah found herself thinking about her own brother's wedding and all the joyful moments she had missed. She imagined the terror that the families inside the ballroom must be experiencing. Their celebration of love and commitment transformed into a nightmare of violence and fear. The contrast between what weddings should represent and what was happening made her more determined than ever to help save the hostages. The lead negotiator established communication with the terrorists, but their demands were impossible to meet. They wanted the immediate release of dozens of suspects who were being held in maximum security facilities, along with weapons and transportation that law enforcement could never provide. It became clear that the attackers had no intention of negotiating in good faith and were prepared to harm the hostages to make their point. Sarah suggested a psychological approach based on her understanding of the terrorist mindset. She recommended that negotiators appeal to any remaining humanity in the attackers by emphasizing the innocent nature of the victims, children, grandparents, and young couples celebrating love. This strategy had sometimes worked with terrorists, who weren't completely consumed by their ideology. During the 6th hour of the standoff, the terrorists began making increasingly violent threats. They released photos of some hostages who had been injured during the initial assault, including an elderly man who appeared to have suffered a heart attack from the stress of the situation. The images were broadcast on news channels, creating public pressure for law enforcement to take decisive action. Sarah volunteered to join the tactical team for the rescue operation, despite the dangerous nature of the mission. Her knowledge of the terrorist network and her recent undercover experience made her uniquely qualified to identify key players and anticipate their actions during the assault. Commander Richards initially refused her request, but Sarah insisted that her expertise could save lives. The rescue operation began at midnight, coordinated simultaneously from multiple entry points. Sarah entered with the main tactical team, through the kitchen area, using floor plans she had studied during her mission briefing. The ballroom was dimly lit, with hostages huddled in groups while armed terrorists patrolled among them, their faces covered by masks. Sarah immediately recognized the leader from intelligence photos. He was indeed Khalil's younger brother, driven by rage and seeking revenge for his family's capture. His behavior patterns matched what she had observed in other members of the terrorist network, confirming that her psychological profile had been accurate. This knowledge helped the tactical team predict his movements and reactions. The rescue operation unfolded with precision and speed. Within 12 minutes, all 6 terrorists were neutralized, and the hostages were safely evacuated from the building. Sarah's intelligence had been crucial in identifying the attackers' positions and predicting their defensive strategies. No hostages lost their lives, though several required medical attention for injuries and trauma. In the aftermath of the rescue, Sarah watched as families reunited outside the wedding venue. Parents embraced their children, grandparents were helped to safety by paramedics, and the bride and groom held each other tightly despite their torn wedding attire. The scene reminded her powerfully of what she had sacrificed 8 months earlier, the chance to celebrate love and family with the people who mattered most to her. The successful resolution of the hostage crisis made national headlines, with law enforcement officials praising the tactical team's flawless execution. Sarah's role remained classified, but she knew that her decision to miss her brother's wedding had directly contributed to saving 200 innocent lives that night. The terrorist network she had infiltrated had been completely destroyed, preventing future attacks and protecting countless families. 3 days after the wedding rescue operation, Sarah finally found the courage to visit her brother Michael at his home. She couldn't reveal the classified details of her recent mission, but something had changed in her perspective. She realized that protecting innocent families from terrorist attacks was directly connected to protecting her own family's safety and happiness. Michael and Jessica welcomed Sarah into their home with cautious warmth, still hurt by her